My name is Lauren, and I'm about to tell you about the one decision I knew was wrong, and still made anyway. I was 35. I taught communications at a small private college outside Lexington, Kentucky, and I had spent my entire adult life learning one rule above every other. At a school that small, a woman's private life becomes public property the second you give anyone half a reason to talk. I knew that rule. I taught inside that rule. I'd built a whole career on it. I knew exactly what I was doing. That's the part I need you to understand before I tell you any of the rest. I wasn't naive. I wasn't some wide-eyed young instructor who didn't know better. I was old enough, tired enough, careful enough to see the cliff from a mile away, and I walked straight off it anyway, with my eyes open, with my heels in my hand, knowing exactly what I was doing while I was doing it. That's the part I still can't forgive. 10 weeks earlier, I had ended a long relationship. Not the kind that ends with screaming. Mine was the other kind. The slow, grown-up kind where two people quietly wear each other down until there's nothing left to defend. After that, I did what women my age do. Went back to work. Smiled through lectures. Graded papers. Came home every night to an apartment that still looked like my life but no longer felt like it. And sat on the couch in the dark, waiting for some delayed reaction to finally hit me. It never hit. That was the problem. I didn't fall apart. I just got quieter. And quiet, I would learn, is the most dangerous state a lonely woman can be in. Because quiet doesn't feel like a warning. Quiet feels like control. So when one of my classes invited me, at the tail end of that semester, to a Saturday cookout at a rented farmhouse outside town, white fencing, string lights, kids running barefoot through the grass, a man working the grill like he was defending a title, I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I needed one normal afternoon. I told myself I was still the same careful, respected professor who had spent a decade being liked without ever once being talked about. I told myself a lot of things that afternoon. Then somebody started playing a guitar near the fire pit. Not background strumming. Real playing. A voice warm enough to shut a whole patio up without asking it to. I turned my head the way every other head was turning, and the young man with the guitar in his lap looked up from the strings, and his eyes found mine across that crowd. And for one stupid half-second, I forgot every single thing I had ever known about who I was supposed to be. His name was Henry. He was one of my students. I need to be honest with you, because if I dress this up, if I pretend there was some grand seduction, some villain, some clean moment I can point to and say there, that's where he took advantage of me. I'm lying. There was no villain. There was a guitar, a song, and a grown woman who should have known better standing in a crowd of people who trusted her, letting herself be looked at like she wasn't the professor anymore. By sundown, I'd be driving him into town. By nightfall, I'd be in a motel a few exits off the interstate, staring at a water-stained ceiling wondering whose hands these were. By the end of that summer, I'd be standing in a drugstore bathroom across town, watching two pink lines sharpen on a plastic stick, while the world quietly rearranged itself around me. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me start where it really started. Before the motel, before the pregnancy test, before the night he would walk out of my apartment and take whatever was left of my self-respect with him. An ordinary Saturday. An ordinary woman who thought she was too old and too smart to ruin her own life. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about so much of it. And the part that still wakes me up some nights is this. If you put me back on that patio, with that guitar, with that voice carrying over the laughter of strangers, I'm not sure, even now, that I'd walk the other way. That's what I'm really here to tell you about. Not a scandal. Not a cautionary tale with a tidy moral at the end. A woman who saw the fire and walked toward it, and is still trying to understand why. Let me tell you who I was before that Saturday, because otherwise none of what I did makes any sense. I had been at that college for almost a decade. Communications department, small building, old stone, ivy growing in places that looked picturesque in brochures and frankly embarrassing up close. My office was on the second floor, 2 doors down from a dean who kept track of every rumor on campus the way other people keep track of sports scores. I knew exactly which hallways carried sound, which colleagues took mental notes, which students were harmless, and which ones were already rehearsing the story they'd tell at their next sorority dinner. You learn a place like that the way you learn weather. You don't think about it. You just dress for it every morning. Students liked me. That matters, in a job like mine. I was friendly without trying too hard, approachable without losing control of the room, firm on deadlines in a way that somehow made them respect me more. I remembered names. I laughed at jokes that deserved laughing at. I stayed late to help kids who were drowning in their first real writing assignment. I didn't flirt. I didn't gossip. I didn't date anyone on faculty, because I'd watched 2 colleagues try that and get eaten alive by the rumor mill before they ever made it to Christmas. I had spent 10 years being the professor nobody had a bad story about. That was my entire professional identity. Liked, respected, invisible in all the useful ways. And I'd earned it. One boring, decent choice at a time. For so long that by 35 I genuinely believed I was incapable of a reckless one. That's the wound, if you want to understand it. It wasn't a tragic backstory. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't some great romantic loss. It was something quieter, and in a way, more dangerous. It was the slow, private realization that I had built a life so careful that nothing could reach me anymore. Not in the good way, in the other way. Because 10 weeks before the cookout, Daniel had left. And Daniel leaving hadn't broken me. That was the strange part, the part I couldn't explain even to my closest friend. It had just confirmed something I had been refusing to see for years. That the 2 of us had stopped trying sometime around our 3rd anniversary and had simply kept living in each other's rooms because separating sounded exhausting. We had cooked dinners and paid bills and shared a bed the way roommates share a bathroom. He had taken a job offer in another state, and when he'd said maybe we should finally admit this wasn't working, I hadn't argued. I had agreed so fast it embarrassed both of us. After he packed the car and drove away, I'd stood in the middle of my living room and waited to fall apart. I was ready for it. I had cleared my calendar for it. I had a bottle of wine in the fridge and a friend on standby and a whole weekend set aside to grieve like a normal feeling woman. Nothing came. Not tears. Not rage. Not even the clean sadness I'd been promised. Just a flat, polite silence, like my own body had nothing left to say on the subject. I made dinner. I watched something on television. I went to bed at a reasonable hour, and in the morning I went back to work. That's when I understood how long it had been since I'd actually felt anything. It was not a breakup that hurt me. It was the absence of pain after one. That was the wound. I had gotten so skilled at keeping my life orderly that I had quietly gone numb inside it, and I hadn't noticed until the one thing that was supposed to rip me open simply didn't. I started doing small things to see if I was still in there. Tried a new running route. Bought a dress I didn't need. Said yes to a faculty happy hour I would normally have skipped. Little tests, all of them failed. Nothing moved. I would stand at the grocery store at 10 at night, watching a young couple argue about pasta sauce, and feel such a deep, foreign envy of their smallness that I'd have to walk to another aisle. So when the cookout came up in the last 10 minutes of my Thursday class, something in me was already leaning forward before I had decided anything. One of the girls, bright, loud, the kind of student who ran 3 clubs and had opinions about every reading, tipped her chair back and said, "You're coming Saturday, right?" I laughed the way professors laugh. "Why does your voice sound so sure?" "Because you always say yes to the fun stuff." She grinned. "And because if you don't, half this class is going to take it personally." Another student joined in. Then a third. End of semester energy. That loose, affectionate silliness students get once grades are almost out of their hands. Somebody clutched their chest in fake heartbreak. Somebody else promised there would be real food. Not the sad chips and salsa of the last one. For the first time in weeks, I caught myself smiling without making myself smile. I said yes. I walked back to my office afterward and told myself a whole list of reasonable things. that I'd stay an hour, that I'd be seen, be polite, eat something, leave before sundown, that it was good for morale, for the department, for my own sanity. I meant every sentence at the time. That's what makes it funny now, in the dark way. I genuinely believed, sitting at my desk arranging student files into neat stacks, that I was in complete control of what that afternoon was going to be. The farmhouse was nicer than I expected. Restored, the way country properties get restored now for weddings and retreats. White fencing, string lights strung between posts that were trying a little too hard to look old. A gravel drive crunching under tires. 2 coolers on the porch already sweating through their lids. Somebody had a portable speaker going. Old, soft country, the kind that makes you feel both nostalgic and vaguely Midwestern, even when you're not. There were couples there, a few kids, a dog that kept trying to steal paper plates off the picnic table. It did not look like a place where a woman ruined her life. It looked like a place where a woman remembered she had one. That's what I mean when I say there was no villain. I showed up in a soft pink sundress. Not short, not tight. The kind of dress a woman my age wears when she wants to look like she hasn't stopped being a woman. I had my hair down, which I almost never did on campus. I was careful about that too. A small, private rebellion. The kind nobody watches for because nobody thinks to. But somebody did watch. He was already there when I arrived. I didn't know that yet. I was standing near the patio with a paper plate, half listening to 2 students argue about whether their group project grade was fair, when a guitar started up from somewhere near the fire pit. Not the phone speaker kind of sound. Real strings, real hands. A voice that came in about a bar later and pulled the attention of the patio like a slow tide. I turned. Everyone turned. He was sitting on a low stool somebody had dragged over, one boot up on a rock, the guitar balanced on his thigh. Dark hair that curled a little at the back of his neck. A face that could have gone boyish if he'd smiled the wrong way, but didn't. He wasn't performing exactly. He was just playing. The way a person plays when they've played so many small rooms that a backyard doesn't intimidate them anymore. I recognized him. Not well. I had another section of his class, a big lecture. He had always been in the back, hoodie up half the time, one of the quiet ones you had to grade twice because you couldn't remember anything they'd said out loud. I would have told you, if you'd asked me that morning, that I barely knew his face. I'd have been lying without realizing it. You always know their faces. You just don't let yourself admit which ones. His name was Henry. He finished the first song and somebody whooped, and he ducked his head the way musicians do when they want to pretend they aren't enjoying it. And then he looked up, and his eyes went past 3 students and a cooler and a folding chair and landed on me. Not by accident. He'd been looking for me. I felt it land in the middle of my chest like a dropped stone. And the professional part of my brain, the part that had kept me out of trouble for a decade, said very clearly, "Walk to the other side of the yard. Go help somebody carry something. Find the host. Go." I did not go. I told myself I liked the music. And I did. That was true. It was also true that I hadn't had a man look at me that way. Not politely, not respectfully, but directly, without apology, in longer than I wanted to count. I drifted closer, not right to the circle. Close enough that somebody shifted on a log and made room, and I took it without thinking about what taking it meant. He played 2 more, then 3. Older country covers, a soft rock thing I'd loved in high school, one song I hadn't heard since my 20s. Halfway through the 4th, I called out a request, half joking, because the energy around the fire had gotten loose enough that professors were allowed to behave like people. He looked up at the sound of my voice like he had been waiting for it specifically, and he smiled, and he said, loud enough for everybody to hear, "For you, Professor Lauren, I can probably make that happen." People laughed. I laughed too. Something in me rolled over. He played it. I sang along a little, under my breath at first, then not under my breath. Another student shouted that our voices worked well together. Somebody else yelled we should start a duo. There was more laughter, more end-of-semester teasing, the kind that's harmless until you're suddenly, painfully aware of the atmosphere underneath it. And the atmosphere had changed. He kept looking up at me between chords, not glancing. Checking. The way a man checks that the person he's playing for is still there, still watching, still his audience. And I kept looking back. Every time our eyes met, my stomach did something I had not felt in so long that I almost didn't recognize it. That was the first real problem, and I want to be clear about it, because everything else follows from this. The problem was not the attraction. Attraction happens without asking permission. The problem was how easy it was to enjoy. There was no pushy line, no hand on the small of my back, no moment I could point to and say that's when he crossed something. It was just a current running under an ordinary afternoon, getting stronger every time he looked up and found me still there. And I was letting it. I was feeding it. I was sitting in a crowd of my own students in a pink sundress letting a 19-year-old with a guitar flirt with me across a fire pit. And part of me, the quiet, numb, starved part that hadn't felt anything in 10 weeks, was coming back to life in real time. When he finished his set, he took a break. He walked straight toward where I was sitting, not casually, with intent. Every professional instinct I had told me to stand up, excuse myself, refill my drink, find a student to talk to, do anything except let this conversation happen in a backyard full of witnesses. Instead, I slid over on the log and made room for him to sit down. He did. And from the corner of my eye, I saw one of my students, the girl who had tipped her chair back in class on Thursday and told me I always said yes to the fun stuff, watching us from across the yard with an expression I could not read, but already did not like. That was the first problem. Not the kiss that would come hours later in my parked car at the curb outside the bus terminal. Not the motel. Not the 2 pink lines months away. The first problem was simpler and worse. It was that I had already been seen. And I had already decided, somewhere under all the things I was telling myself, that I did not care. He sat down close enough that our knees almost touched. And for a second, neither of us said anything, because the silence right before a first conversation is the last honest moment you get. Then he said, quieter than he'd been on the stool, "You really do have a good voice." I told him his was better. He smiled like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Not arrogant, exactly. Just relieved. We talked. I don't remember everything. I remember he asked how long I'd been teaching, and I told him 9 years, and he said that was almost exactly half his life, which should have been a warning printed in large type, and somehow instead sounded like a compliment. I remember he asked about the book I'd assigned that semester, the one he'd actually read twice, and something in my chest softened at the specificity of it, at the fact that he'd been paying attention in a class where I'd thought he barely looked up. I remember he said he played weekend sets at a bar downtown, that music paid better than people assumed, that he liked performing more than school anyway. Then he asked if I was married. It should have jarred me. It did, a little, but it also made me answer. I told him no. He asked if I had kids. No again. Then, because lying would have been more suspicious than honesty, I said I had just gotten out of a relationship not long ago. Something brightened in his expression. "So you're single," he said. I tried to keep my voice neutral, technically. "Then we have that in common." That line shouldn't have done anything. The words themselves were nothing. But there was an ease to the way he said it, like he wasn't asking permission to flirt anymore because he'd decided he already had it. And I'd given it to him. I'd given it to him by not standing up. I'd given it to him by laughing at the song. I'd given it to him every time I'd met his eyes across that fire pit instead of looking somewhere safer. I should have ended the conversation there. I did not. He asked me to come hear him play sometime. I told him to pass the details along through somebody in class, which was the most ridiculous halfway response I could have given. Too encouraging to be proper, too cautious to be honest. He laughed like he heard exactly what I was doing. The sun started going down. People started leaving in clusters. Henry had come with another student, and that student wanted to stay. He asked if I could drop him into town on my way home. I hesitated. Not for moral clarity. I want to be precise about that, but for optics. The yard was full of eyes. Saying no would have looked more pointed than saying yes. Saying yes was also what I wanted. I let the optics carry the decision I'd already made. We left before most of the others. I can still see the way the light went pale gold over the fields as we pulled onto the road. He sat angled toward the window at first, then toward me. He smelled faintly like wood smoke and clean soap. The kind of scent that makes you more aware of enclosed space. We talked the whole drive, music, campus. How some students treated college like a waiting room and others clung to it like a raft. He asked what I'd wanted to be when I was his age, and I couldn't remember. That answer stayed with me longer than it should have. There was no hard stop in the conversation, no place I could later point to and say that was where I crossed a line. The line kept moving because I kept moving with it. He asked me to drop him near the bus terminal downtown. I pulled over to the curb, put the car in park, and turned to say something light and forgettable. He was already looking at me, not glancing, looking. In the pause, I knew exactly what was about to happen, with a kind of certainty that almost felt like consent before the fact. He leaned in slowly enough that I could have stopped him without confusion. I did not stop him. I met him halfway. And the second our mouths touched, every careful adult thought I had been holding together all evening simply went somewhere else. It wasn't a tentative kiss. That would almost have made more sense. My hand was on the back of his neck before I'd fully registered I was touching him. He kissed me like he'd been waiting through the whole drive for exactly that moment. By then, reason was already late. We drove to a motel a few exits away. I'm not going to turn that part into something prettier than it was. No speech, no negotiation with my better self. Just a shared, reckless understanding neither of us interrupted. A cheap lamp? A thin comforter I didn't let myself look at too closely. It was impulsive. It was irresponsible. It was also intensely, undeniably good, in the way a thing is good when your body has gone without for too long and finally gets permission. Afterward, the room changed. That's what happens when adrenaline leaves and consequences walk back in. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling myself back into the woman I was supposed to be, and he pulled his shirt on across the room, and the cheap lamp made everything look tired. I felt flushed and sick at the same time, thrilled and ashamed, and it was impossible to tell which feeling belonged to what I'd done and which belonged to me. He smiled once, almost shyly, and said, "Well, that happened." I laughed because I had no other sound left in me. Then I drove him home. The second he shut the car door and stepped onto the curb, the dread started settling in. Not regret in the simple sense. I didn't regret wanting him. That would have been easier. I regretted the reality around the wanting. He had been in my class. He was younger by at least 15 years. I had built my entire career on not becoming a cautionary tale, and I had just walked into one wearing a pink sundress. I did not sleep that night. I stared at my ceiling, replaying every minute, then every possible damage. What if he told somebody? What if somebody had already guessed? What if the story drifted back through the department before the next semester started? The only thing that kept me from coming apart was the calendar. Summer had just begun. No classes, no hallways. Maybe, if we both stayed quiet, it could live and die inside one reckless day. That was the plan. It lasted about 48 hours, because the humiliating truth was that I could not stop thinking about him. I thought about him at the grocery store, folding laundry, grading the late submissions I'd promised myself I'd finish before break. I thought about the scratch in his voice on lower notes, the way my name had sounded in his mouth when there was nobody else in the room. Desire does not always fade under shame. Sometimes shame makes it stick harder. Weeks passed. No messages. No calls. We had never exchanged numbers. That should have been relief. In a strange way, it was worse. Just silence full of imagination. Then fall semester started. I looked for him on the first day without meaning to, scanning the back rows of a lecture where he had never been enrolled. Then the second day. Then in places I had no business looking. The student center, the parking lot, the hallway outside the humanities office. He was nowhere. A week in, I asked one of the girls from that class. I used the flimsiest pretext imaginable. I said my nephew was thinking about guitar lessons and asked if Henry still played anywhere. There was no nephew. Even as I said it, I could hear how transparent the lie was. She told me he wasn't enrolled anymore. She thought he'd dropped out. I smiled like that was mildly disappointing information and walked back to my office and sat there for 5 full minutes staring at my computer without seeing it. Part of me was crushed. Another part, louder, insisted it was probably for the best. I tried to let that thought do its job. It didn't. A few days later, the same student walked up after class and slipped a folded scrap of paper onto my desk. "What's this?" I asked. She gave me a look that was far too amused for a girl her age. "Address." I unfolded it. A bar name. A street downtown. My face must have changed because her smile widened. "He plays there on Saturdays," she said. "And before you ask, yes, he asked about you." Heat went up my neck so fast I was sure it showed. I asked as calmly as I could what exactly he had said. She shrugged in that infuriating way young people do when they know they have information worth withholding. "Enough." Then she added quietly, almost kindly, "Don't worry, Professor. We know." My stomach dropped. "We know what?" She gave me a small, almost affectionate look. "That something happened." I asked if he had told her. She didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. That was the moment the story stopped belonging only to me. I spent the rest of that day pretending my face wasn't hot. The paper sat in my bag like an accusation. I told myself a dozen times I would throw it away. I did not. That night, I put it on the kitchen counter, moved it to the table, folded it smaller, unfolded it again. I hated how tempted I was. I hated even more that under the fear was relief. He hadn't forgotten. I held out for several days. Then Saturday came, and by late afternoon, I was already choosing an outfit with the kind of care that exposes your intentions before you're ready to admit them. The bar had low amber light, framed records nobody had dusted, and enough noise under the music to make everything feel intimate if you leaned in. I heard him before I saw him. The same voice, cleaner now, sharper, practiced. He looked like he belonged on that tiny raised platform in the corner. Like some version of him had been waiting all along for a room to turn toward him. When he finally spotted me, his whole face changed. It was not subtle. He leaned toward the mic at the end of the song and said he wanted to dedicate the next one to somebody he'd really hoped to see again. Then he looked right at me and added, warm and unmistakable, "My professor's here tonight." Heads turned. Actual heads. I wanted the floor to open under my chair. I sat there gripping the edge of that tiny table with both hands, in a soft pink dress I had absolutely picked on purpose, while every drop of blood in my body went up into my face. Then he started playing one of the songs I had requested at the cookout. Then another. Then another. By the time he finished his set, I already knew I had made the worst possible choice for my own peace. He came to my table during the break. We kissed each other on the cheek, like civilized adults pretending context hadn't split open around us. He said he had missed me in a tone so direct, I glanced around to check if anyone else had heard it. He said he had thought about coming by campus just to see me. I told him that would have been a terrible idea. He grinned. So you did think about me. I should have denied it. Instead, I asked if he was still single. He asked if I was. That was answer enough for both of us. I stayed for another few songs, then told myself I needed to leave. I paid my tab, got up, waved discreetly toward the stage. He gave me a look that was almost comically disappointed. I made it all the way out onto the sidewalk before the music stopped mid-set. That made me turn. A few seconds later, the door swung open, and he was there. No guitar, moving fast. Leaving already? I said I had work in the morning. He said he wanted my number so we wouldn't keep disappearing on each other. That was the practical thing, he said. The real thing happened a second later, when he stepped closer, put one hand lightly at my waist, and kissed me hard enough that I forgot where we were. Again. That became our pattern before either of us named it. Texts, calls, late messages, videos of him playing songs he knew I liked, Sundays that turned into whole afternoons inside my apartment, then evenings, then weekends. Once we were alone for real, no motel room, no clock ticking against us. The recklessness that had started in a parked car widened into something softer and much more dangerous. He noticed what I ordered, what I wore more than once, which songs made me go quiet. He'd show up with coffee he knew I liked, or a bakery box from the place across town I had mentioned one time. Not expensive gestures, accurate ones. I had not realized how starved I was for accuracy. The first time he called me his girlfriend in public, I felt the word hit me like a thrill and a warning at the same time. I should have corrected him. I didn't. By then, I wanted it to be true. About 5 months in, I asked him to move in with me. I wish I could say he pushed for it, and I reluctantly gave in. The invitation came from me. We were already spending most nights together. I was paying the apartment alone. He was tired of roommates. All the ingredients for a bad decision were dressed up as practical solutions, and I let that fool me. He said yes, immediately. For a little while it felt almost unreal how easy happiness could look from the outside. His guitar case leaned against my wall like it belonged there. I'd come home from campus and hear him practicing in the bedroom. He'd kiss me in the doorway before I had even set my bag down. But living with somebody is where fantasy meets plumbing and mood swings, and the 1,000 small humiliations of being fully seen. It did not collapse all at once. First, it bent. He got jealous in ways that almost seemed flattering at the beginning. If a male student lingered too long after class, he noticed. If I mentioned a colleague, he wanted context I had not meant as suspicious. At first, I dismissed it. I even found it mildly ridiculous. But ridiculous things become exhausting fast. The ugly irony, of course, was that I was jealous too. I hated the girls who hovered after his sets. I hated the ones who touched his arm when they talked. I hated how young some of them were, how casually they occupied the world, how easy it was for them to flirt without carrying any visible cost. I had walked into the relationship through a moral compromise, and once I was in it, I became afraid someone else would walk in the same way. We started hitting each other below the belt faster than we should have. If he was late home from a gig, I got sharp before he'd even opened the door. If I stayed late for office hours, he wanted to know whether there had actually been office hours. He started making comments about how friendly I was with students. I started making comments about how many women seemed to need personal attention from the guy with the guitar. One night he said, "Maybe this is just how you are, Lauren. Maybe you don't know how to keep it professional." I stared at him, because for a full second I couldn't believe he had chosen that word. Professional. Coming from him, it was almost surgical. I asked him whether he really wanted to talk about professionalism, now, after everything. He said he was just being honest. I told him honesty without shame was just cruelty with better branding. That became another pattern. Fights that started with one thing and ended somewhere dirtier. There was always just enough truth hiding around the edges of the lie to make it hurt more. Then came the night that shifted everything from damaged to broken. We had been fighting on and off for 3 days, Stupid circular arguments that left residue even after they ended. That evening, he said he was tired of the tension, tired of my attitude, tired of feeling like whatever he did would be interpreted in the worst possible way. I fired back that maybe if he acted like someone with nothing to hide, I wouldn't have to interpret so much. He laughed once, without warmth. "You always have to be right, Lauren. That's the problem. You don't even hear yourself." I said at least I came home at night. He grabbed his keys off the counter. I asked him where he was going. He said he needed air, needed space, needed one evening without being interrogated. That should have been survivable. Couples walk out to cool off. They come back. But there was a finality under the irritation in his voice that made my chest go tight before the door had even finished closing. He walked out, and for the first time since he had moved in, he didn't come back that night. I sat on the couch with every light on until about 3 a.m, phone face up on the cushion beside me, watching headlights cross the ceiling and willing each one to be his. None of them were. No call. No text. No angry message saying he'd stayed with a friend and would be back in the morning. Just a silent apartment, a half-drunk glass of water, and the sharp, specific realization that I had built my entire new life around a man who could walk out of it in the middle of a Tuesday fight and not feel the need to tell me where he'd gone. That was the night the question changed. Until then, the question had been, how do I keep this quiet? Now the question was, what exactly have I been doing for the last year, and with whom? He came home a little before 10 the next morning. I heard his key in the lock before I saw him, and something in my chest jumped like a dog that still believes every footstep belongs to somebody coming back to love it. I hated my own body for that. I had spent the whole night rehearsing the calm, adult woman I was going to be when he walked through that door, and the second the door actually opened, every line I had practiced walked out of my head. He looked tired. Not guilty exactly. Tired. Same jeans. Same shirt. Hair pushed back like he had run his hand through it 100 times. He shut the door quietly behind him and looked at me sitting on the couch still wearing yesterday's anger like I had slept in it. He said my name once, careful, like he was approaching something wounded. That only made me worse. I asked him where he had been. Out. I asked if that was supposed to count as an answer. He said he had driven around, then stayed with a friend because he didn't want to come back in the middle of the night and start another fight. I asked which friend. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, which was all I needed. Then he gave me a name. I did not believe him. That's the truth of it. Maybe he was telling me the truth. Maybe he wasn't. But by that morning, belief was no longer something either of us had left in good working order. I stood up and told him that if he could spend the entire night out after leaving our apartment in the middle of a fight, then he could keep going. I said it hot and fast, with too much pride under it. He told me to calm down. I told him not to insult me by acting like this was me being dramatic. He said I always did this, always reached for the ugliest version. I said maybe because ugly versions kept turning out to be true. Then I asked the question I had been carrying since dawn. I asked if he had been with another woman. He stared at me for a second like I had slapped him. Then he said no, but in a tone that sounded offended instead of persuasive, and I did not know it at the time. But that was one of our deepest problems. Neither of us knew how to soothe each other once suspicion took over. We only knew how to defend ourselves. So even his denial landed like an attack on the fact that I had asked. I said I wasn't stupid. He said he never called me stupid. I said he didn't have to. He took one step toward me. I took one back. I still remember that, because I think he noticed it too. Something in his face changed right then. Not softness, distance, like he had just seen, all at once, how little faith I had left in him, and how little patience he had left for proving anything to me. He told me he was tired of living like he was on trial in his own home. I told him then he should leave it. There are sentences that feel temporary while you say them and permanent 1 second later. That was one of them. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was checking whether I meant it. I was too angry to take it back. So he walked past me, grabbed a duffel bag from the bedroom, threw a few things into it without much order, and headed for the door. I followed him halfway there, still talking, still saying things I can justify emotionally, but not morally. I said if he wanted freedom so badly, he could have it. I said maybe now he could stop pretending he was one kind of man while acting like another. I said more than one cruel thing, because cruelty feels efficient when you are scared. At the door, he turned and said very flatly, "You always have to win, Lauren." Then he left. This time it was full daylight, and somehow that made it worse. For the next few hours, I told myself I had done the right thing. A man who disappeared all night had no business asking for trust. I cleaned the kitchen, changed the sheets, put his toothbrush in a drawer because throwing it away felt too dramatic, and leaving it out felt humiliating. Then evening came. Then the apartment got quiet. Then I missed him so badly I felt ashamed of my own spine. I waited for a text. Something. Anger has a shelf life when two people still want each other. Usually one person softens first. A day passed, then another. Nothing. By the end of the week, I was checking my phone so often I hated the sound of my own notifications, because none of them were him. Finally, I broke and texted first. I kept it controlled, asked if we could talk. Said I didn't want things to end like that. He answered hours later with one sentence. He said he needed time. That should have told me exactly where I stood. It did not stop me. 2 weeks after he left, I asked him to meet me. He only agreed, because I pushed. We met outside a coffee place near downtown, nowhere private, nowhere that belonged to either of us. He looked good, which was unfair. More rested than he had been in weeks, less tense. That alone felt like a betrayal, even though I know how selfish that sounds. I told him I missed him. He looked away when I said it. I asked whether this was really it, whether after everything, all those nights, all those impossible futures we had talked about half asleep against each other, he was really going to walk away because of one terrible fight. He said it wasn't one fight. He said it had been building for a long time. He said he was tired of the suspicion, tired of every disagreement becoming an accusation about his character, tired of feeling like nothing he did ever got read generously by me. Then he looked right at me and said very quietly, "I'm finally breathing again." That line hurt more than anything else he said. Finally breathing again. Like loving me had been suffocation. I asked if there was somebody else. He smiled without humor. That's exactly what I mean. You can't even hear me without needing another villain in the room. I told him he was avoiding the question. He said maybe he was. Then he said he was better off alone than stuck inside the same fight over and over. I started crying before I wanted to. I hate that. The loss of control in public. The way tears make the other person shut down faster, because now they feel cornered by your pain. He did not get cold, exactly, but he got harder, like he had walked into that meeting with his decision already sealed, and my tears only confirmed why. He said he was done. Just like that. Done. I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward and cried until I gave myself a headache. Then I wiped my face, drove home, and told myself that was the last time I would ever chase a man who had made himself that clear. It was not the last time. A few weeks later, I went to the bar where he played. I knew I shouldn't. But I went anyway, telling myself I just wanted to see him once more. To confirm something. What exactly I couldn't have said. He saw me almost immediately. What followed felt so deliberate that I still can't decide, even now, whether he meant to hurt me or whether I only watched him through hurt. and turned everything sharp. During his break, instead of coming over, he stayed near the bar talking to a girl I had never seen before. She was young, bright, the kind of pretty that looks effortless because nobody has taught her yet how expensive attention can get. He leaned in close when she talked. She touched his arm more than once. He did not move away. I stood there like an idiot, pretending to watch a game on one of the screens while my whole body knew exactly where he was. When I finally went up and asked if we could talk for a second, he came over with obvious reluctance. I asked if we could step outside. He glanced back toward the girl and said he was in the middle of something. In the middle of something. I said I would only take a minute. He looked irritated, not conflicted, just irritated. And that humiliated me almost more than if he had been openly cruel. We talked, but only for a moment, and only far enough from the crowd to lower our voices, not enough to make it private. I asked if he could please not do this right in front of me. He asked what exactly he was doing. I said he knew. He said I had no claim on him anymore. I said I wasn't claiming anything. I was asking for basic decency. He looked tired in a way that made me want to shake him and kiss him at the same time, which is a dangerous combination in any human being. Then he said, "There's nothing left to talk about." Nothing. That was the word he used. By the time I made it back to my table, I already knew I should leave. Instead, I stayed long enough to watch him drift back toward that girl and laugh at something she said like his face had not just closed in mine 2 minutes earlier. I drove home shaking. I'd like to tell you that was the end of the public humiliations. It wasn't. For a few weeks, I managed to stay away. Then I failed again. The second time I went to the bar was worse, because by then there was no illusion left. He didn't just talk to another woman. He kissed her. Nothing staged. Nothing dramatic. Just enough touch. Enough easy intimacy. Enough public comfort to tell me that whatever fragile hold I thought I still had over his memory was gone. I was sitting 3 tables back in a dress I had picked with shaking hands, and I watched him tip the brim of her beer toward his mouth. And then I watched him lean in and kiss her. And then I watched her laugh with her hand on his chest, like she had known him 1,000 years. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Long enough to understand that nobody else in the room had any idea who I was to him. That to the rest of that bar, I was just a woman at a back table, a little overdressed, nursing a drink that had gone warm in my hand, watching the guitar guy flirt with the girl of the night. That was the thumbnail. That was the picture I still can't get out of my head when I think about the worst moment of this whole thing. Not the motel. Not the night he walked out. Not even what came later. That. A soft pink dress, a wine I couldn't taste, and the clear, cold, humiliating knowledge that the man whose guitar case had been leaning against my wall for half a year was kissing another woman in public, in the same bar where he had once stopped a set because I walked out the door. I left before he could see me. That is the only mercy I gave myself. I made it to my car, sat with my hands on the wheel in the dark parking lot, and let out one single, ugly sob that scared me because of how much of it was rage and how little was surprise. Something in me broke right there that had not broken in any of the earlier pain. Not because he had moved on. People do. I knew that. It was the combination, the speed, the casualness, the way our entire history had shrunk in public, to me being the woman standing off to the side while he turned his attention toward somebody easier. I realized then that if I kept going back, I would keep finding new ways to degrade myself. So I stopped. Not emotionally. I was nowhere near that. But physically, publicly, visibly, I stopped putting myself in front of him like a wound asking to be reopened. I drove home that night and pulled into my lot and sat in the car again before I could make myself go upstairs. I looked at my reflection in the dark windshield, mascara smudged, mouth tight. A woman I almost didn't recognize looking back at me from the other side of the glass. And I thought, Whatever this is, whatever I have become over this man, something has to give. Because I cannot keep doing this. I just didn't know yet how much worse it was about to get. Months passed before he called. I went to work. I came home. I taught classes. I pretended my life had returned to a shape I recognized. Some days were manageable. Some days I'd hear a song in a grocery store and have to walk to another aisle because memory had become physical again. I did not date. I did not try. My body was still organized around a man who no longer belonged to it. Then one afternoon, about 4 months after that last night at the bar, the phone rang, and it was him. He sounded almost casual, which made me grip the kitchen counter harder than I meant to. He said he thought he still had a few things at my apartment, some clothes, a charger, maybe a notebook, and asked if he could stop by sometime and get them. The request was so ordinary it was almost absurd. I should have said no, or packed everything in a box and left it with the front office, or had a friend there when he came. Instead, I said yes. I knew it was a bad idea while I was agreeing to it. That is the humiliating part. Not that I made a mistake by accident. I recognized it clearly and walked into it anyway. He came over 2 evenings later. The minute I opened the door, every practical lie I had told myself about being over him fell apart. Gray t-shirt, hair a little longer than before, and, I noticed immediately, no bag for the things he had supposedly come to pick up. I noticed it. I ignored it. We sat at the kitchen table. I offered coffee. He said sure. And then, through the smallest gestures, the mug he used to fight me over because it somehow made coffee taste better. The neighbor who used to vacuum at 9 a.m. like it was a personal attack. A rainy Sunday we had stayed in bed all afternoon. He walked us both backward, one familiar detail at a time, until the room no longer felt safe. I remember looking at him and thinking, what are you really doing here? Because he was not in a hurry. He had not touched the pile of his things. There was a looseness in him that felt almost intentional. I could not tell whether he missed me, whether he wanted me, or whether he simply liked knowing he still could. Then he said he had thought about me more than he should have. Not dramatic, low, matter of fact. Which made it hit harder. I asked why he was telling me that now. He said because it was true. I should have stopped the conversation there. I should have said truth is not always kindness. But my body had already turned traitor. He moved closer before I fully registered that he had moved at all. 1 second we were talking. The next he was standing beside me, touching my face, lightly, like asking a question without language. I looked up at him. All the anger I had carefully stored for months was still there. So was the hunger. And the worst thing about hunger is how easily it mistakes recognition for safety. When he kissed me, I kissed him back. I wish I had a better explanation. I wish I could say he manipulated me, that grief fogged my judgment, that I was too shocked to resist. The simpler truth is that I still loved him enough to let one evening undo months of self-protection. We ended up in my bed. It was fast, clumsy, intense, and almost immediately regrettable in the way things can be regrettable while they are still happening. Because one part of you is participating, and another part is already watching the consequences gather. Afterward, lying there side by side, I let myself feel the wrong hope, not full reconciliation, something close enough to be dangerous. His hand was on my stomach. The apartment was dim and still. For those few minutes, I let myself believe the break in us had not been final after all. Then he ruined it. Not with one brutal sentence. That almost would have been cleaner. He ruined it the way people often do. Indirectly. Through implication. He mentioned he had been seeing someone. Said it loosely, as if context did not matter now. Then, when I went still beside him, he added that it was getting serious. Said he hadn't planned for tonight. Said things were complicated. Complicated. That word made me cold so fast it was almost clarifying. I turned and looked at him. because I honestly could not understand the nerve of what had just happened. I asked whether he was telling me he was in a relationship. He pushed himself up on one elbow and started trying to explain, which only made it worse. He said they were not exactly official at first. Then he said they kind of were now. Then he said he did not know why he had come over and let things happen. He said being there with me brought everything back. He said he had not expected it. That was when I realized the most humiliating possibility was also the true one. He had not come back because he had chosen me. He had come back because he could. I got out of bed before I knew what I was going to say. My whole body felt hot with shame. He kept talking, trying to soften it, trying to make room for confusion where there had actually been selfishness. I told him to stop. Then I told him to get dressed and get out. He didn't argue much. He collected his things for real this time. Paused once at the bedroom door like he wanted to say something more useful than sorry. Then he left. And just like that, it was over again. Only now it was worse, because I had helped him do it. I missed my period 3 weeks later. I blamed stress at first, because stress is convenient that way. Then I remembered, with a sinking feeling so complete it almost felt like vertigo, that I had not been on birth control anymore. There had been no reason to be. I hadn't been sleeping with anyone. I hadn't expected to sleep with him. I bought the test at a pharmacy across town where nobody would know me. That's ridiculous, I know. Pregnancy tests don't become less true because the cashier is a stranger. But shame is practical in weird directions. I knew before the full result even settled. Positive. I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at it until the lines blurred. Then I laughed once, a short broken sound that didn't belong to humor at all. Then I cried. Then I just sat there, because the world had not ended. But it had changed shape so completely that standing up felt naive. I thought about telling him. Of course I did. I pictured the call, the silence on the other end, him asking if I was sure, him sounding trapped, him sounding kind, which felt even more dangerous, because kindness can reopen hope as efficiently as cruelty. Then I pictured the version where he stayed out of obligation, or worse, said the right words, while already emotionally belonging somewhere else. That was the part I could not get past. Because when he came back to my apartment, he had already been moving toward another life. He had still chosen to touch me. He had still let me believe, for one reckless hour, that what passed between us meant return, when maybe all it ever meant was access. So I did what people do when no option feels clean. I decided not to tell him. Not then. Maybe not ever. I know some people will judge me for that. Maybe they'll be right. But I was not deciding in a clean theoretical universe. I was deciding inside the wreckage of loving a man who had shown me, twice, that he could come close enough to light everything up and still leave me alone in the dark afterward. So here is where the story ends, in 3 parts, because nothing about it collapses into one. The first is that I am, at 36, carrying the child of a man who does not know he is going to be a father. I am teaching my classes in looser sweaters. I am eating saltines in my office at 10 in the morning. I am alone in a way I did not plan for and cannot undo. The second is that I still catch myself listening for his key in the lock, and I hate that more than anything he ever actually did to me. And the third, the last thing, the thing I carry when the apartment is quiet and nobody is there to perform for, is the question I will probably never get to ask him out loud. Why, Henry, did you come back just long enough to make me love you all over again, and then leave me here carrying a child you may never even know is yours? What would you do in this situation? Be honest. Or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.